Welcome to our discussion on how do we build better, stronger, gender-equal businesses. As a very quick introduction, I know you'll be disappointed that I haven't got 72 PowerPoint slides. Our purpose at Kinetic, and it really connects with the discussion we're about to have, is to enable individuals and companies with whom we work to create a positive footprint. And this is not just words on a page, this is very personal. And many of you know, including many of our clients know, that I actually left the corporate world, at the time Procter & Gamble, 13 years ago, because I decided that I wanted to build a business and an organization that would have that social impact. The catalyst was that my father died age 61. I suddenly thought, life is too short, I need to get on with it. So that's always been the driving force, and it's the driving force that holds us together. That said, one of the big realizations I've had, especially over, I would say, the last year, and particularly thanks to some of the conversations with Jill, is really that we as a company, I need to be much more explicit in the role that gender equality plays in that purpose. Because if social impact is of course about equality, which in my view it is, gender equality is by definition a huge part of that. And therefore, this is the end of my introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to have this discussion with you, Jill, so thank you. And she will introduce herself, but for those of you who don't know her, and some of you already do, but for those of you who don't know her, she's a wonderful professional with a great mix of successful experience, business savvy, and great challenging thinking. And having known her for 20 years, I can say that with complete certainty. So without further ado, I can look at you now instead of the camera. Could you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Will, for that lovely introduction. I will just look at the camera briefly to say hello to everybody. It's great to see some old friends out there and some new friends as well. I'm Jill Collins. I am the author of Why Men Win at Work, and I'm obviously going to talk a lot about that today and about gender equality and why I think it's so important. And in my previous life, I was a senior vice president at Procter & Gamble. My last job there was running the beauty business for Europe, India, Middle East and Africa, and I left there a few years ago, and now I'm doing very, very different things, but using lots of the stuff that I learned there. So but it's fantastic to see you all. Thank you for having me.
Not at all, not at all. So I have to start with the obvious question. So I did a fairly long declaration up front of what drives me and why I'm excited about this conversation. But I guess the basic question is, what drives you in this context?
Yeah. You know, what drives me is very simple, actually, Will. And it took me a long time to get there, but once I really became a student of this issue, which was relatively late, actually. I wasn't always a raging feminist, and I realised the extent of it, and I realised, it's very simple, really. This, we have 50% of the population globally, basically. And yet, when you look at the leadership positions in the world, whether it's anywhere, sport, business, politics, wherever, 90% plus men in those roles. So to me, that can't be right. And especially that can't be right when there are stacks of data that says that, and really stacks, that says that businesses, organisations are better when they're run gender equally. So when they have gender equality at all levels, right to the top levels, they perform significantly better. Top line, bottom line, any metric that you want to look at. And society is better when it's run gender equally. Relationships are better, families are better, the world is better. So to me, and it makes logical sense to me that would be true, because of course if you're meeting or working on anything, if you have diverse input and diverse ideas, you're going to have better discussions, you're going to have more complete discussions, you're going to make better decisions, you're going to have better plans. So it makes logical sense that equality would lead to better. So that's what drives me, is it's kind of maths. How do I help contribute to 50% of the population becoming 50% of the leadership of business in the world? Because I just think that would be smart for everyone.
Agreed. So maybe you've covered it, but just to bring it out, I mean, one of the lines you use quite often is this idea that it's not charity, it's business. Mm-hmm. So do you have more to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, I always say this, and obviously I love the social justice reason for it, that that is always a reason, but it's actually not the primary way that I look at it. I look at it as not charity, this is business. Don't do this to be nice to women, or because you think, oh my goodness, that we really must do that, mustn't do that, and we must have different policies. Do it because it's good for your business, and do it because it's good for your organisation. And the reason I think that's so important is I think it's more sustainable. Yeah. So I think one of the things we see, and that we've particularly seen the last year, is gender equality can get very quickly deprioritised if you view it as a sort of charity, nice to do, we're doing it for social reasons. We saw, with the pandemic in the last year, the gender gap pay report was postponed, cancelled for the year. All sorts of D&I policies went on hold. That's just missing the point for me, because actually, if you view it as not charity but business, you do it because it's good for the business, which means that whatever crisis is happening, this always remains top of your agenda because you know that it's going to be good for your business. And if I was running a business still now, this would be an absolute top business strategy for me, because I know it leads to growth. And show me a business that doesn't need growth right now. So that's what I mean by it's not charity, it's business.
I get it. But to push on that a little bit, we know it. There are many intelligent people out there who know it. There are some who have good intent. Let's even pretend the majority have good intent. Mm-hmm. So why do we still have this gender inequality if most of us know this already?
And by the way, I do believe that the majority have good intent. And I've become even more convinced by that since writing the book, based on the people who've written to me, and so many men who've written to me. And there are clearly a lot of what I call feminists with an M-A-N out there. There are a lot of good intentions, and there's a lot of work that goes on here. I do not believe that most men wake up in the morning, jump out of bed and say, how can I build the patriarchy today and destroy as many women's careers as possible. I really don't believe that's what happens. I believe bad men, there's a chapter in the book called A Few Bad Men, they're absolutely the minority, in my view. So why does it happen then despite those good intentions? And why does it happen despite, the fact that we've got this pool of phenomenal women? There is actually a simple answer. There is 200 pages, there is actually a simple answer. And the simple answer is that when decisions are made, when the decision is being made about who to give a job to, who to give a promotion to, who to give a leadership position to, in most instances, and let's argue at senior levels 90% of the time, the job is given to a man because the person making the decision believes that the man is better. They don't give it to the man because he's a man. They give it to the man because they believe he's better. So the real question is actually, why do they believe he's better? Because the data would say that he can't always be better. Not 90% of the time be better. Let's argue 50% of the time he may be the best choice. He's possibly the best choice. But 50% of the time, given that women are 50% of the population, have equal intelligence, equal competence, equal capability, equal, at least, by the way, leadership ability based on all of the data. I don't even think anyone argues this point anymore. Why then do we, and it's not just men who conclude, why do we keep concluding that the man is the best choice? And you will hear things like, she's very good, but I just think he's a bit stronger and I just feel more confident in him. So the real question is actually, why do we conclude that? And then you get into the very complex answer, because that is all sorts of invisible, subconscious, unintended things, unintended barriers that are leading us to draw the conclusion that the woman isn't as strong as the man, even though she absolutely may be. Things like the invisible power of culture that I talk about, competence versus confidence, the umbrella theory, all of these things combine to create what I like to call the invisible ceiling, because I don't think it's a glass ceiling, because I can see glass, and I can touch glass, and I can smash glass. Yeah. invisible is a little more difficult to get your hands around.
And you implied the answer already, and I think it's pretty clear in the title, but just to spell it out, when you talk about competence versus confidence, what do you mean there?
Competence versus confidence. I mean, it's at the heart of so much of this. Here's the thing about confidence, right? Confidence gets a bad press, but we all love confidence, right? We love confident people. It is completely human to love confident people. If somebody's confident, we trust them. We give them work. We give them projects. It's natural. The problem with confidence is that for lots and lots of reasons, generally, and it's a generalisation, you have to generalise when you talk about this because you just have to. For many, many reasons that start in childhood, women are less generally confident than men. Yeah. And so you have a situation where if we're attracted to the confidence, but actually the women, for whatever reason, are not projecting the same confidence, but behind that confident curtain, they're very, very competent, what can happen is that we miss their competence. So we see the confidence, we choose the confidence, and we miss some incredible competence that's maybe being quiet or doesn't have as much share of voice or is just not putting itself forward for whatever reason. And so that's one of the reasons why we sometimes can not make the best choice because we're choosing confidence instead of competence.
Got it, thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to open it up for other questions from the audience. But I mean, you talk about a few bad men, whether it's a few or not. But let's just dig into that a bit. How do we deal, how do our clients deal with the underground sexism, but you know, beneath the polite surface?
There's a book in that, by the way, Underground Sexism. I think it could be the next sexism book, but it's really dangerous, this underground thing. And I think it's happening. I'm not saying it's happening everywhere, but I think it is happening because we are pushing some of this underground. Because if you raise awareness of this problem, but you don't really deal with it, and you don't really include men, and you don't really get them on board, they're intelligent enough, the men who are in these companies, they're intelligent men, they're intelligent enough to know, I now know there are things I must not say and I must not do. I don't necessarily agree that I must not say or do them, but I certainly won't do. I know that I must not do them out loud. So you push it in some instances underground. That's super dangerous because the overt sexism we used to see in the 60s and 70s, maybe later, depending on where you worked, it was horrible, but at least you could see it. At least you knew what you were dealing with if somebody said make the tea, love, or tapped someone's bottom in the face. At least we knew it was there. If it's underground, we can't even see it. They really don't know. It's literally happening, in the locker room or equivalent. So that's very, very dangerous. So what I think is so important is that when this is discussed, it's discussed really openly. It's discussed in a way that men really feel that they can talk openly, and they can interact, they can understand, they can probe, and they can get to the point where they go, okay, I get it. I get it. I get why it's important. I get why it's an opportunity. I get why that has such a bad impact. And then they're truly in, and then you can really dissolve the issue rather than just shoving it under the carpet.
Got it. Or into rooms that no one else gets into. Got it. All right. Well, let's see what comes from the audience.
Jill, it seems that throughout your book you got the experience of those senior leaders who have the typical objection of saying, we appoint by meritocracy. What do you have to say about that?
It is such an interesting question. We've all seen it, and it comes back to that thing of, people do believe they're appointing the best person, and I have worked with some amazing leaders, amazing people, who've, in their minds, they've absolutely done their due diligence, and they've gone through, and that yes, the man is just better, and it comes back to that. Why is that? They are potentially not looking behind the confident curtain. They have not probably factored in the invisible power of culture, which is that the culture that they have. If, for example, they have a male dominant culture in their group, that male dominant culture, it will be a culture where, frankly, women are not able to perform as well as men. If you're comfortable in a culture, you're relaxed, you feel you belong, you chill, you perform at your best. And the opposite is true. You cannot be your best. You also, by the way, are less authentic in a culture that isn't your own, because it's so difficult to resist that temptation to try to fit in, to say, okay, what works around here? And then what you see is people copying other people's strengths and behaviours rather than using their own. And we all know that at the end of the day, I'm a massive fan of StrengthsFinder. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant philosophy. We are at our best when we use our own strengths. So if a culture prevents somebody from showing up, performing at their best, being authentic, we're always going to feel like that person's just not, there's something a bit off there, and that person's just not quite as strong. And so we conclude he's better, she's not so good. But what we're actually seeing is not performance. What we're actually seeing is comfort and confidence in a culture. So there are lots and lots of things that happen, but I think it's really important to recognize this and be aware of this as leaders, that when we feel we're really doing the right thing and we really got it and we really made the right best decision, we probably didn't, or we possibly didn't.
Thanks, Bill. I come from the oil and gas industry, which is not the most popular industry at the moment, but there you go. And I had a 35-year stint in that industry. Now, I completely agree with what both of you say, particularly what you say about gender equality or the lack of it. But I've got a couple of questions, really. What we saw in the industry that I was in is that in the technical areas, it was impossible to push gender equality because there weren't enough female engineers to just make that happen. So that was one thing. Whereas in the other areas, such as HR and marketing and sales, it was much better, to the tune that it actually went almost the other way, which is also fine, by the way. And by the way, my best bosses were female, without any doubt. So is there something that has to do with, you feel, the type of industry and the sort of work that perhaps is less attractive, and I'm not seeing this as an excuse, perhaps is less attractive for either boys or girls, and that is an element why it is skewed and not balanced.
I get this question a lot from the people who work in these tech areas. I'm doing an event on Monday actually for the shipping industry, which is absolutely male dominated, and they're fascinated by how do they attract women to shipping. So I think it's an absolutely valid question, and I think I would think about it in two parts. I think the first is obviously at the recruitment stage, where you fish in the pond that there is, and then there's once you've got your people, how do you then drive the equality? At the recruitment stage, clearly, you can't create people with qualifications who are there. It is not your responsibility to change that in the world. If the reality is that there are there's a 60-40 split or a 70-30 split in gender in the people who have the qualifications that you actually need, then you have to target that. What I would say though is there is huge work to do on that prior to that recruitment stage by society, because there is no inherent biological reason why a woman should not be interested in these things and should not be capable of getting these qualifications. So that's a whole separate question, because there are all sorts of things that are happening to girls from birth images that they're seeing in TV, in film, what they're seeing in the news, what role models they're being shown of what a woman should be and what a woman should do, what they're being shown about what a scientist looks like. You know, you ask kids to draw a scientist, and most of them will draw, you know, a white male. So I think there's a huge amount of work to do on that, because I think it's frustrating that girls, you know, do not feel that they can do something or should do something that they can do. But I'm not going to put the responsibility on your shoulders. But very, very important. But what I would say is, you know, absolutely, my general rule is you target 50-50. If that doesn't exist at recruitment, then you target what there is, but you target that and you don't settle for less than that. Then though, once you're actually managing the talent that you have, here you've obviously got more control. And again, I'm not asking you to disproportionately skew it, but I would apply exactly the same 50-50 philosophy with whatever your percentage is. Let's say for the sake of it was 65-35, I'm making it up. Just stay true to that. Commit to that at all levels. Don't be pleased with yourself with anything less than that. And what that means is you'll have to do all the same things as the person who's targeting 50-50. You'll have to look behind the confident curtain. You're going to have to really look at your culture and really make sure that the culture is not dominated by any group and is enabling the women to succeed and perform just as well as the men. And importantly, I think this is a really important point. People will often tell me, but you know, then sometimes I may have to promote somebody who's less experienced. And I would say yes. Absolutely, sometimes you do, because I don't actually, this is going to be a provocative statement, I do not believe that the person who's been doing something for 20 years is necessarily better, more competent, or has more potential than the person who's been doing it for 12 or 13 years or whatever. So I believe that but it should be his job because he's been doing current job longer. I don't buy that at all. I think it's really about looking at the ability, looking at the competence, and looking at the potential, and just having that mindset of, you know, I'm going to catch myself before I fall into the trap of assuming that the man's going to be the best choice, because for all the reasons we've talked, I promise you that is probably going to be your instinct. So you'll have to fight it. Does that answer the question?
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's a very complex issue, and the only other thing I wanted to say is that in the work that I did with my female bosses, I found one thing particularly important, and that is that where decisions had to be made, making a multiple of choices, taking a variety of views into account, I found these decisions always slightly better than some of the board decisions, which were either black or white kind of thing. Now, I'm putting it really generic, but that helped me a lot in the management teams that I've been in Shell, which made it that much more diverse and that much more better in terms of overall decision. And that's why you now see, I'm still in touch with loads of them, that the gender equality is moving in the right direction. It's not there yet, but it's moving in the right direction, all the way from real leadership positions down into the middle management and lower level. So I think there is an element of hope there, but no, I hear fully what you say.
I love what you said about the diversity point. I personally believe that what you were seeing at play there with those female leaders wasn't necessarily the superiority of women, which I don't believe in. I believe in equality, not superiority. I think what you were seeing was the power of diversity. You were seeing the power of, exactly as you said, when you have a diverse group of people and the leader of that team has the skills to be able to truly listen to all of those people, get the input from all those people, get the ideas from all of those people, then what you get logically is you get a more complete discussion, you get a better plan, you get a better decision, and you get better results. So I personally believe Men are equally capable of doing that. Sometimes, though, those aren't necessarily the men we choose to be our leaders, which is a whole separate question. I'm going to disagree with only one thing that you've said. You're more optimistic than me about progress. Within your group, you may be seeing good progress, and that's absolutely fantastic. On a macro level, I really don't believe we are. And I think, I should have said this when Will asked me what drives me. One of the biggest things that drives me is just absolute frustration with how little progress we're making. I find it shocking, actually, that we're still in this situation where 7% of CAOs are women, 9% of heads of state, 24% of parliamentary seats worldwide are held by women, which means that all of those decisions that are getting made on policy, which impacts women just as much as men, women are just not represented in those discussions. And I think we've all seen examples in the last year of some appalling decisions that have been made about how to manage the pandemic, how to manage schooling, how to manage childcare. I do not believe those decisions would have been made if there had been more women in those rooms. So I'm less positive about the progress, but I'm still optimistic because there is absolutely hope, but I think we've got to attack this one.
Let me take that one, and then I'm going to go back to Vincent, has his hand up for a question. So we'll go to Vincent. But a question's actually come in, which is, what will success look like and feel like when we get it? Yes. So let's be optimistic for a second.
Yes, let's be optimistic. When an organisation gets it, when a lead team gets it, you actually, you see it pretty quickly, actually. The first thing that you see is, you don't see a dominant culture. So what you see and what you notice is there's no dominant culture here. So most of us right now, at senior levels, will look around, and if you do take the time to look around, you'll see a male dominant culture, and you'll often see a white male dominant culture. When you get it, you'll see there is no dominant culture, and you will see that what that means is everybody's comfortable, everybody's relaxed, everyone's performing at their best, everybody's able to be authentic, they just bring themselves, they don't try and fit in, they don't try and copy. Everybody equally can participate and contribute. That's the first thing that you'll see. You'll see equal share of voice. Yeah. I'd be interested to know who sees equal share of voice in their meetings today. Not many. You'll see equal share of voice, across the diverse groups. Importantly, what that will mean is discussions may be longer. They will probably be longer. Meetings may need to be longer because people will not be seeing things the same way. Not that even a dominant group ever sees things the same way completely, but you'll see even more diversity because you'll see people literally bringing in angles and views that you just hadn't seen before. I can promise you Boris Johnson's meetings would have been a lot longer last year if he'd had more women in the room. But then you'll see, as we said, more complete discussions, better decisions. You'll see equal pay when they get it. You'll start to see equal pay because people will realise that if you truly want equality, you have to pay people the same way for the same work and not just pay the person who asks for the pay increase. It's absolutely proven that women are much less likely to ask for a pay increase. And we live in a world where, frankly, wherever you look, there is a 17% pay gap. It's pretty consistent everywhere. So you'll see equal pay. But ultimately, what we'll see, and we're a long way from this, but we'll see it, is it just will become normal. Yeah. It'll just become normal to see a diverse group, to not see the dominant culture. We won't need to discuss it anymore. We won't need to comment anymore. We'll live in a world where when a woman gets the CEO job, it won't be front page news because it will be just normal. This is the dream. People say to me, I post a lot and comment a lot, and I'll sometimes get somebody say, I just wish we didn't have to discuss this. And I think, believe me, so do I. That is the dream, is the day that I don't need to discuss this and comment on it anymore because it's just normal.
Jill, yes, just building on what Valerie said earlier on, if the the person who's got to be chosen is not always the one who's going to be the best as a leader, but if we aiming at diversity, meaning that you've got someone like a female person, for example, who would help the group being more representative in terms of society. What could we do to bring that forward? Like, for example, would we need to have some quotas? How we could be more actively convincing companies to move towards more representativity or gender balance groups?
The first thing I would say is, at a broad level, I'm not saying to any of you that you need to compromise on quality and you need to compromise on better. I believe that there are women out there who are, just as good or even a better choice than some of the men. And I'm not asking you to give all your jobs to women, just half of them. So I don't believe you need to compromise on the quality because the data would say that women absolutely have the competence. You may need to compromise on how many years experience, just because of all the reasons. But I don't believe you need to compromise on the quality. But I do think you make a really interesting point when you say that sometimes actually you want to bring in something different rather than more of the same. And there's actually, a brilliant example of a man, I can't remember his name, but he was basically recruiting for his team, and he was using a test to basically understand who'd kind of got whatever score. And he actually didn't hire the person with the top score. He didn't even hire the person with the closest to the top score. He hired the person who got the questions right that the rest of the team got wrong. And so I think that's a brilliant example of your point, and it's just another, it's a great example of the power of diversity. So this is clearly a visionary man. Not many people do this, but I thought that was a brilliant way of looking at it. To your question about how to intervene, I have absolutely come to be a passionate believer in 50-50. I didn't used to be at all. I used to be one of those people who had all those arguments about why we shouldn't do that. And I've come to believe it's the only way. To set that as a target and to commit to it. You have to believe in it first. You have to commit to it because you believe that this is good for your business or your organisation or whatever. Don't just do it because some board's telling you to do it or shelves or whatever. But I absolutely believe we have to. And the reason I believe we have to is if you don't make a manual intervention, the self-fulfilling prophecy will just keep fulfilling itself. So all of these dynamics, culture, confidence, competence, umbrella, all of those things, creating that invisible, it will just keep fulfilling themselves. And you'll just keep ending up with the conclusion that, but the man's better. So we wanted to have more women, but the man was better. So I've actually come to believe that you have to set that target and say, and I with the caveat of the tech example and, obviously what's available at recruitment, but you have to set that target and say, right, we're all in. I'm P&G trained, and one of the things I was trained on my first day was you get what you measure, and I absolutely believe in it, and I absolutely believe in the opposite, which is you don't get what you don't measure. And I believe that if this is as I've said, if this is just done as charity or for social reasons, it's not going to work and it's not going to stick. And I think it should be a business strategy, and a business strategy that has a measure, because I don't believe we're going to get there unless it does. So, but it took me a while to get there. So I understand if people aren't, but I'm passionate about it now. And if anyone, I get livid when I see people celebrating, we've got 30% of women on the board. We're there. It's like, excuse me, how is 30% equality? I don't really get that. So yeah, I'm there now. I'm evangelical about it.
But one of the things I love about this book, and it proves that you were well trained at Procter, is you end with a good to-do list.
I do.
So tell us about your to-do list.
So, of course I do. Of course I have this to do as well. It was really important to me that this was a constructive book and an action-focused book. I did not want this to be a moaning book, and I hope everyone who's read it will agree it's not a moaning book. This book is about understanding, it's not just about the data, it's about going beneath the data, understanding why does this happen, the psychology of why it happens despite the good intentions, the subconscious stuff, the invisible stuff, the unintended stuff, because I believe that you can only fix something when you understand it, and you can't. You have to understand it first.
Yeah.
So it was really important to me to really explore the why, and then it was really important to me to have a constructive action plan at the end and say, right, okay, we got this now.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do. So yeah, there is a massive to-do list. The Sunday Times said it was an almighty set of recommendations. That was their summary of it. They said, we love this. I have a to-do list for parents, for teachers, for media makers, for employers, for managers, for women and for men. I end with men because actually, and much as it pains me to say this, men are actually the most important in this. We're getting nowhere without men.
Yeah.
We're getting nowhere without men. So unless men get it, buy in, become champions, become feminists, women can sit around and talk about this and moan about this as much as we like, and we do, because sometimes we have to vent. But we won't be able to get anywhere without men on board. So there's a to-do list for everyone.
I just have a comment. In my previous life, I worked with MasterCard for 7 years, and they understood the root cause of some of this inequality being driven at home, the education at home and at schools. And as a result, they started the STEM program for girls. And it's not a question, it's just a comment to see how we address it as a company. If we believe in that root cause, and STEM is a priority, and we know that our customers like MasterCard, Coca-Cola as well, are, supporting this type of initiatives, shouldn't we do something with We Make Change, or create kind of a module to address STEM as an initiative for the company and drive the gender equality from the root?
I absolutely love that, and having said earlier, we can't dump the responsibility of this on you. I absolutely think you can play a huge role if you've got the resources to do that in what you put out there and the images that you put out there, and actually at the school level, because that is where so much of this stuff is being formed in the girls' minds and the boys' minds. So I love that. And also, in your recruitment materials are so important. They're important in all of the industries, by the way, but so many companies just make some basic errors in how the language that they use and the images that they use that just completely turn off any of the great young women out there who might otherwise have been interested. So there are lots of positive things that I absolutely think that you can do, yeah.
It's just interesting to get your feedback or insight. So my career has been 150% in the male-dominated industry. So 25 years with an automotive company and a Japanese one to boot, and then logistics, and then even clothing retail. And it's still, the boards are still the same, so the last company I was at, all men. Have you had much experience with these type of organizations in coaching them or advising them, where it's very easy to fall back on the overall industry is, one that women won't attract to? And I know we've talked, of course, building the pipeline and all these other things, but if you go in right now and you would be asked to advise in one of these organizations where, quite frankly, they really shouldn't have the time if they're just going to now start to build that pipeline. They need to get moving fast. Have you given advice at that level with these types of organizations as far as what to do immediately now?
I think you have to start at that level with those organizations, because it's not going to it's not going to change without them. And you know, the first thing, you know, for any of these interventions, the absolute first thing that you have to do is get that very top leadership level, the board level and the, you know, the exec level, truly on board. And obviously, if that's whether that's a male dominant group, a male exclusive group, or just a male dominant group, before you do anything, you've got to do that. And by that I mean really investing that time in getting them to understand why it's in their interests. So getting them to understand that this isn't just a, you know, scorecard exercise, something that they have to do because they're going to get into trouble with somebody if they don't. Really investing that time in getting them to understand actually the business case. So taking them through the data of how businesses have just, you know, how they perform better. Getting them to really buy that, getting them to see opportunities in their own business. I was talking a few weeks ago with a gaming company, which is absolutely male dominated, and we were talking about this, and the CEO's first reaction was, I'm totally in, but the business case isn't going to fly because we're growing, so no one's going to go for that. So I said, well, hold on, are you growing ahead of the category? Are you growing your share? Are you growing? And this is a smart guy, so he very quickly goes, I can't believe this, I can't believe I've missed the obvious. We're absolutely not growing in line with the category. We're absolutely not growing share. And by the way, we're completely underperforming in some of the dynamically growing sectors that are driven by female and mom purchase. So there is, I'm going to put myself out there is always a business case, and you've got to start there, and it's really investing that time with that group of people to get them to the point where they go, I'm in, I get it, I want it, you know, where do we start? And then once you've got there, then you can start the diagnosis of, okay, where is the issue? Where is the issue starting? It'll be in multiple places. Diagnosing that, and then, okay, this is the intervention plan that we need. But the diagnosis is easy. It takes time, but it's easy. And the intervention plan, it can only happen if you've done that first step.
Yeah, I agree. And my experience too in working with board level is also when they get very proud of themselves when they bring in a woman.
Yeah.
But you've got to bring at least two in, because so many of the easy stuff, even, you know, in the learning and development, let's say, retreats that they're used to having, sometimes it's this easy stuff that I find them very difficult to give up on. Oh, we have a woman now, we can't do even our team building the same way, or we can't. So sometimes it's just the easy stuff and that they're used to, that, you know, they don't want to think about what does that mean to the club.
It's a massive point you make, the whole, you know, we brought in a woman, or even we brought in two women. I always say, God help that poor woman who's absolutely on her own in that team, because she's in a male-dominant culture. I can promise you she won't be able to perform at her best and contribute at her best. And, you know, the CAO I was talking about was one thing he said to me when he first took the job, was he heard exactly that, which was, we hired a woman last year and it didn't work out. And he said, well, I wonder why. I wonder why it didn't work out. Could it have anything to do with our culture? So you're absolutely spot on.
I'm wondering if there's any way we can target with any accuracy where it's going wrong, where the disconnect is. So I was interested to hear your opinions on schools and education. I've got a powerful, assertive 10-year-old girl in my life who I don't want to change one bit or be changed one bit. I've also, because of COVID, been listening to a fair amount of what's happening in her classroom this year. And it strikes me that there is a very gender equal bias in everything she's undertaking at the moment. And I'm imagining from my experience of millennials that when she gets to the sort of university age, that is also an inclusive, gender equal environment. So where is the disconnect between that and ultimately what you've experienced in your life?
There's a brilliant quote from Melinda Gates, which is, "We're still sending our daughters into workplaces designed for our dads." I think it's a brilliant quote, but it is a massive problem, and I talk about it a lot. We are quite rightly bringing up our daughters and our I don't have a daughter actually, but I know many people who do it, bringing up their daughters to be confident and to not question for a second whether they're equal to any boy or any man. That's certainly how I was brought up. And absolutely we must do that. But it's a little bit of a shock when they hit the workplace because they're not actually expecting it. And actually the Obamas talked about this in a podcast recently, that they know they've done this with their daughters and they're concerned. It's going to be a shock when they hit that workplace. And it's not necessarily... for me, I didn't see it for a very long time. It really will depend on the woman and the work she's doing and what organisation she's in. She will hit it at a different time, but at some point, if she progresses her career, she will hit a male-dominant culture. I was talking last week to a guy who used to run Hearst magazines, and he was telling me that that was an entirely female-dominated industry. There were just women everywhere, except at the management level. You went into the boardroom, one or two women if you were lucky. So your daughters will hit this at some point in the workplace. And the key thing I think is we got to work on that, but that's not going to change overnight. So I would advise anyone who knows a young woman, tell her she needs to be aware. She needs to be aware of the barriers. She needs to be ready for them. She needs to be prepared to manage them well. Because actually that will also contribute to the cycle. If she manages it well, I'm not dumping this on women, I'm absolutely not. But I didn't always manage them well. And I would like, people say to me, I wish I'd read your book 10 years ago. I say, my goodness, I wish I'd read my book 10 years ago. I think getting them ready prepared for the fact that the workplace will not necessarily look like her school or her university or wherever is really important.
I was looking in parallel, 35% of females on STEM subjects at university. This is 17, 18, 35% STEM, and it drops down to 19% in engineering. So I suspect that the problem is actually at the school level. I studied engineering myself, and the numbers were well below that, which is why I was interested to see where it is now. So I really think that if we want to fix this in the workplace, work has got to be done on STEM and particularly engineering at a much, much earlier age.
I'm curious to hear your view about what is the one thing that we could take from the societies that have consistently been better at gender balance. And I mean probably Scandinavia, even Switzerland to a degree. I'm not Swiss, by the way. What is the one thing that we can learn, that we could take, we consultants, we trainers could take away and work on with our clients on mindset?
I mean, you're right. The Nordic countries are better. They're not perfect. They're not where I want them to, but they're definitely better. And I think there's one massive thing we can learn from. I am going to quibble with you on Switzerland though. And women only got the vote 25 years ago in Switzerland, I think. So.
Yeah, but they have a women president.
I don't want to get into a fight with any Swiss people. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that the Nordic countries do absolutely brilliantly is parental policies. I think...
what was that, sorry?
Parental policies. So they are the closest to having what I would call truly gender-neutral parental policies. And by that I mean not just, on paper, gender-neutral parental policies, but they actually really, really live and breathe them. And that is so important because, I think we all know that women take 80% of the unpaid work at home for the family, even if they have their own paid job and their own career. And that doesn't add up. And it doesn't especially add up in a COVID world where you've got homeschooling and working from home and extra work. And, you know, there literally are women crashing out of the workplace because of this. It is an absolute crisis. Equalising, I really, really believe that until we have 50-50 at home, we won't have 50-50 at work. And therefore parental policies are so important. And one of the things, you know, in Sweden, they have equalised parental leave. So basically, a father is entitled to take 6 months parental leave, just as the mum is. And that is so important because there is a huge amount of data that says that if a man takes parental leave, he will remain much close, at 50-50 of the unpaid work at home or close throughout the rest of that relationship, because of the experience that he has of being that parent and having that parental responsibility at the beginning. So this is not just about sharing the load in that first year, it's about sharing the load throughout the life. And by the way, it leads to strengthening of relationships and all sorts of other positives. And the one interesting thing I'd say though, as good as they are, you know, I know I have friends in Sweden and I have friends who have taken this, and even there they still faced a lot of jokes from other men in the workplace about them taking this, and you're going to be drinking lattes all day, and that they somehow weren't taking their career seriously because they were taking up this parental leave. And that has to stop, and that's what I mean by it can't just be a policy. It has to be something that employers and colleagues absolutely, you know, support in each other. Because I think men have to feel not only that they can take this, but that it's actually cool for them to take this. I think we've all got a huge role to play in that as well.
My question is more to what extent you believe as women we have to change the way we think and the way our understanding of the gender issue has to shift in order to play more of a role in helping other women succeed, whether that's through mentoring. To what extent are we victims or are we our own worst enemy? And we need to shift the way we think about this issue too to move ahead.
It's a great question. There are lots of things I think women, by the way, can do and can be more savvy about. The umbrella theory, the confidence thing that we've taught. But to your specific question, this one is on women, right? I have a chapter in the book called Sisters Are Not Doing It For Themselves, and it is exactly about this. Now, I think we've all experienced amazing women who've been, you know, in the sisterhood. They've supported us, they've helped us. This last year for this book, I can't tell you how many amazing women have helped me, you know, and in the workplace. But I'm going to put myself out there and say that every woman on this call will tell you that she's experienced the senior woman who did not support, did not hold the ladder down for her or for other up-and-coming women, or shook the ladder so violently that nobody had a chance of clinging onto it. And that has got to stop. And you know, we can't change those. There are lots of reasons, by the way, that this happens, and they're often it's actually sad. There are often backstories. There's a lack of confidence. There's a scarcity mindset that's driving fear. So I don't want to judge harshly, but I would say that, you know, as women moving forwards, I'd like to hope that when we're in a situation where we can support and sponsor other women, we will, because men do that for other men. Men do it for women as well, by the way, but men do that for other men. So if men have 90% of the leadership positions and they support young men, and then women have a tiny few of the leadership positions and they don't support younger women, then this is never gonna work. So you're totally right, we absolutely have to do this. This is on women, and by the way, it's embarrassing because men see it. Men tell me, we know this happens, we can see this happening. So yeah, I have some stern words to say on this to women at the top. There are definitely some things we need to get our act in order on.
Thank you. That is 1 minute past 2. I have genuinely found this an absolutely fascinating hour. I'll admit up front, I was a little bit nervous, and
you didn't know what I was going to say.
Within 3 minutes, found myself jumping in the bath and loving it. I could see by the body language of everybody else in there, it's the same. So huge thank you, Jill.
My absolute pleasure. I'm
And
going
a
to
round
talk
of
with you
applause,
all
please.
day. Those are fantastic questions, by the way. It's brilliant to see people hear people asking these questions, because it's a journey to progress.